My name's Ajit Jetmalani, and I'm a child psychiatrist and director of the Division of Child Psychiatry at Oregon Health and Science University in Portland. I chose to work in the field of psychiatry partly based on personal experiences, being the son of a psychiatrist and living in an environment where I was surrounded by people going through the experience of mental illness due to the fact my father was living and our family was living on the grounds of the Oregon State Hospital. But during medical school, it became really evident to me that the things that captured me really were people's stories, their life stories, and the impact on those life stories were really difficult to impact in a brief office visit. I thought a lot about family practice or internal medicine or pediatrics, but I really wanted to delve deeper and get sort of a better grasp on what troubled people, what was getting in their way of their happiness and functioning. And I found that when I did my psychiatry rotation, you actually had the time to investigate and understand and form relationships with your patients. And I think within that context of relationship, I found that creating opportunities for change was more likely to occur. So that was the big draw for me in psychiatry. Also, just as I was in training, the explosive amount of knowledge in brain science and understanding how mind and brain and culture all intercede and connect was really exciting and fascinating, and it just captured me. You know, young adults in transition really, we think of that period of life from age 15 to 25, even to 30 in some ways, as a distinct period of life because of the range of both opportunities and challenges that young people face, and the neuroscience that we are beginning to understand now about why it is that that's a unique developmental period. The uniqueness of it has to do with a range of issues. And in psychiatry, we think of things from a biological perspective. We think about things from the psychology of a person's life, and also the cultural and social influences on what's happening to a person. And in the transition age adult or transition age youth group, we've discovered recently in the last 15 years that what we thought earlier was not true about brain development and adolescence. We thought that there was a peak in brain change that occurred earlier in life. For instance, around the age of a year and a half, language really begins to explode. Around age 5 or 6, a person can sit still because their frontal cortex is working well enough, the front part of their brain, to help you sit still in a classroom and actually focus and attend on what a teacher's telling you. Profound brain changes that are occurring at that time are measurable and visualizable on imaging. But what we know now is that, in fact, in adolescence, what happens is that process is continuing actually fairly dramatically. And what adolescents do and young adults do is they tend to focus more when there's a problem put in front of them on emotional problem solving rather than logical problem solving. And that's both related to the hormonal influences that are occurring, as well as the brain is really ripe for change. There are cells in our brain that are waiting for exposure in order to form new connections. And if they don't get exposure, or they get a different type of exposure, that will determine the long-term outcome of those cells. So in fact, we lose cells throughout development, and by losing cells, we form more complex and clear connections with other cells. So you'd think that the brain would grow larger as you gain more knowledge. It actually grows smaller. The gray matter of our brains shrinks as we develop these new connections because they're more efficient. In adolescence, what happens is that there's an opportunity for that efficient brain development, but there are so many cultural and psychological influences on how that goes. For instance, from an environmental perspective, alcohol, when an adult, a fully developed adult drinks alcohol, their brains recover much more quickly from the influence of alcohol than an adolescent brain does. The adolescent brain, because it's changing and developing, the brain cells are actually taking longer to recover, so the impact may be days later of having that binge drinking over the weekend, whereas an adult might recover more quickly. So there's ripples of impact both on the chemical influences that young adults have, as well as the experiential processes of trying to decide, well, if I'm in a calm situation, I'm talking to my parents about how am I going to handle the stress that happens to me at school, maybe experience with a bully, the offer to have some pot. I'm having a calm conversation with my parents about that. I can sound very clear-headed, thoughtful, adult-like in that conversation. When I'm with my peers and there's a lot of pressure on me, I may make an emotional decision, not a logical decision. And as an adult or even as a younger child, I may make a more logical decision about that. And that's the influence of hormones and this rapid change that's occurring in the brain. So it's a risk time. It's also an opportunity time. I mean, the capacity for adolescent, young adult functioning in terms of cognitive functioning, profound abilities that arise in adolescence, the ability to think in creative ways, the physical prowess that comes with adolescence and young adulthood, amazing opportunities and amazing risk. And so culture, brain biology, the psychology of life, all converge. And the outcome of that is also then influenced by the genetic sort of predisposition we all have. We all have genetic strengths and risks. And whether they get expressed or not depends on what the influences are in our environment. And so this combination of our gene risk and strengths to environmental impact is something that is a key thing to think about when we think about policy and outcomes for protecting our youth and strengthening their opportunities for success. The other aspect to think about is that the adolescent's goal really is to individuate, to become an individual, to establish a sense of identity, and to become competent in a range of areas. And the headwinds that we face both come from our own genetic makeup, potentially in our family environments if there's been a lot of trauma, and then in what our culture provides us and what society provides us. So there's multiple variables that go into the outcome of that transition from childhood to adulthood. So strengths and vulnerabilities both are present. So because the population does have unique needs, we should have a unique approach to young adults, and we haven't. What we've done is people who've experienced the mental health system have actually experienced, at times, a coercive system of care. So they've had serious mental illness. The approach has been containment-oriented. Maybe they've experienced a lot of pressure or even coercion to use psychotropic medicines. Maybe the emphasis has been a disease model. You have a condition, you need to treat it with this medicine. Less of a relationship-based model. Not a model based on hopefulness and future, but based on illness and hunkering down for the long haul of being sick. And I think that the very nature of that approach, what happens is it comes in direct conflict with a few things. It comes in direct conflict with a person's sense of self-agency, so the ability to sense that you have the capacity to direct your life in the direction you want to take it. It's a key sense that you must have in order to succeed in the adolescent goal, which is to become independent. Well, if you're going to become independent, you have to feel that you have self-agency, and that if you make an effort, have an idea, you can actually take that to fruition, take that to reality. If instead a person has experienced care as coercive, disengaged, impersonal, forced, what they will experience is a desire to flee from that experience. Why would somebody want to continue to seek that kind of an experience over and over and over? It's a sense of hopelessness, and it's a disconnect. What we found is people who succeed in utilizing care effectively have had an experience of a collaborative, engaging, supportive, let's get through this together. What are your strengths? What are your personal goals? How do we support you in achieving what you want to achieve? And take that seriously. Really highlight the fact that this is what you're interested in doing. Not lose the you in that discussion. So a person is not you are not a schizophrenic, you're a person with schizophrenia. You're not a depressive, you're a person with depression. But the distinction seems subtle, but it's really key. It's really key because you have to see the whole person in order for them to feel whole enough to pursue life's challenges. So I think in the child system we've started to make changes in that approach, and I think that we are trying to look at things from a much more strengths-based perspective, trying to find things that people can feel that they have a reason to strive for, and also bringing people into the decision-making around their care. Sometimes when people are very ill, they aren't able to participate fully, but that doesn't mean they can't have the experience of having that as a collaborative process. So if we do that hard work, and then we send a young person abruptly into an adult setting, what they'll find is there's a big gap because many 18-year-olds drop out of the system. We know from public health data that we lose a huge percent of people who have significant mental illness to that dynamic of, I want to get the heck out of here. So when a person does go to an adult mental health system, they're going to see 30, 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old people there. They're not going to see the 18 to 25s because they're avoiding it like heck. So what we have to do is really design a system that has a transition opportunity that is culturally sensitive. And by culture, I'm not just talking about the culture of one's heritage, but the culture of youth. What can make a person feel comfortable showing up somewhere where they feel like they have agency, they're being treated in a way that supports the fact that they are a young adult and they have the ability to impact what happens. And yet also provide excellence in their health care. What I have tried to do with young people that I work with is have them try and separate out their health care as a healthcare decision rather than as a fulcrum or a place where conflicts around independence and individuation get worked out. And separate out, well, let's take care of your health care and let's focus on these conflicts as well, but can we make those separate things? And when they get intertwined, nobody succeeds in that process. The other thing that we tend to do because we've misunderstood the laws around privacy, what we tend to think is, well, somebody just turned 18 and we do a familyectomy. We kind of say, okay, you're an adult now, we're not going to involve your family. We're not going to look to other social supports. You're an adult, that means as an individual you should be coming to me and I should just be dealing with you. And we're not going to pull anybody else in. That's absolutely the wrong approach. Young people have to have people care about them. Well, we all do, but particularly at that vulnerable time of life. So supporting young people in seeking out, well, who is their core support system and engaging them in the process of their health care is really a key strategy. It's not a adverse event for a young person to feel reconnected with their family. If that family is a safe place to reconnect, we need to connect the family to the person when they age out of the young adult system, the child system, excuse me. So being a strengths-based system is really key in the transition age adult programs. Focusing on connecting to family and other natural supports. And then looking at the management of their challenges as being part of a broader picture. And an example of this is the ESIP program with this Early Assessment and Support Alliance for young people who have schizophrenia. This model was created in Australia, and we now have this in many sites in Oregon. And the really unique thing about that approach, which I think is a great model for transition age adult care in general, the unique thing is that the process is focusing on vocational future, educational future, family relationships, personal agency, which means, like I said, the ability to have choice, but also responsibility. So you need to have young people feel that they both have the ability to make their own independent choices, and they have a responsibility to society as well and to others around them. Both things are important. Um, and then an emphasis on medical care that is very thoughtful around treating the disease process as best we can, as opposed to managing the behavioral symptoms. So historically, we've used medicines at times to control behavior rather than treat the underlying condition. And that's led to an overutilization of antipsychotic medicines, which can be very effective short term in helping a person with explosive emotions and behaviors. But long term, there's a lot of risk involved, and we shouldn't be using those medicines long term unless somebody has a condition that warrants it. So again, involving the person and making good decisions based on a full amount of knowledge about why they're taking a medicine, what it's for, how it fits into their overall healthcare picture is a key strategy. You know, a lot of people wonder, well, why is this a surprise that we're finding now that brain science supports that there is really a unique difference that we didn't really realize before we had neuroimaging. Why is that the case? Why didn't we know sooner that we should do things differently? I think we did know. I think that there's real challenges when you deal with stereotypes, societal stereotypes and stigma. They're a teenager, of course they're doing that. That's what teenagers do. Or that's how a teenager breaks free of their families, becoming defiant, oppositional, and out of control because they're trying to break free and become their own person. We labeled behaviors as being explained by just the psychology of that experience. Again, what we've learned now is that it's really helpful to integrate psychological theory and biological science to sometimes create new understandings, and this has become true in our understanding of adolescence. It's also true in our understanding of attachment and early childhood. The neuroscientific and observational data that we have now about childhood and early childhood is very different than it was when it was based on looking at adults' memory of what happened to them as children. A lot of psychology was based on that in the beginning. We think about, well, what happened to kids? What happens to kids by learning from adults what they remembered about their childhood? And it wasn't really, shockingly, it really wasn't until the 40s and 50s that we started directly examining children through the process of development to begin to understand what their experience might be. So the sciences have informed our assumptions. Our culture still demands different notions from us, that our culture still drives different ideas. And we're all subject to that. Even psychiatrists and neuroscientists are subject to the culture that they come from. I think, though, truly the notion that the frontal cortex continues to develop and that throughout young adulthood, and that the limbic system, which is our emotional brain system, is much more activated and prevalent in adolescence during stress, is something we identified through neuroimaging. You could say observationally that you saw that in observing adolescents any day on the middle school or high school campus, that you saw that kind of pattern of people who seem to not be using their obvious intellectual prowess and gifts at those very sensitive moments. We've always known that. This is just sort of added to the picture of how this is not just a sociocultural issue, but a brain science issue. Fortunately, unfortunately, it's lended more credence to the notion that we have to think about these things differently. The other factor that is part of a societal barrier to seeking care is the issue of stigma. And we have always separated out mental health, chemical dependency challenges as somehow different than other health challenges. We've looked at them historically as somehow related to a deficit in moral character, or maybe it's the family's fault. It's somebody's fault as opposed to just an unfortunate outcome. If somebody has cancer, very few people think it's your fault if you have cancer, unless you're smoking. It's usually just bad luck, and there's a lot of empathy, sympathy, and support. If you have depression or attention deficit disorder, psychosis, any number of conditions, the notion has been that is a sign of weakness that's not acceptable, and that there's a sign that you didn't try hard enough. If you had tried harder, this wouldn't have happened to you. And I think the humiliation that creates, and the sense that if I'm open about this and seeking care, that others will think less of me, sort of creates a strange cycle, because really, when you can't function because of your mental health or chemical dependency challenges, people are actually going to be much more concerned about their relationship with you than if you sought the care and had a positive outcome. That, in the reality is, when people seek care and have a positive outcome, that can be very empowering rather than stigmatizing. But getting there is a challenge. I think there are a lot of efforts now to change that. I think in my experience, when I first started practice 28 years ago, the stigma was much more dense and ubiquitous. There's a lot of holes in the stigma belt around us. I'm really seeing change happening, and part of that change is through the efforts of programs like Oregon Youth Move. The notion that you can feel empowered and have a group of others who've shared experiences and then can actually impact the system is the best anti-stigma message that there could be. And some of the most potent anti-stigma messages come from organizations like Youth Move Oregon. Youth Move Oregon has taken a group of people who've had shared experiences and frustrations, and taken that frustration and turned it into a positive action, impacting politics, impacting the healthcare system, impacting the judicial system. Really, if you think about what impacts legislators, for instance, legislators listen to people's voices, their constituents' voices, more than a professional voice. And I think that Youth Move Oregon has actually found a way to engage the system of care and the political system in a way that's impacted outcomes. I've seen this progress over the last 5 years in a dramatic sense in Oregon. I learned about Youth Move Oregon when I first met Martin Rafferty, and I have been a member of the CSAC committee, which is the Children's System Advisory Committee to the Addictions and Mental Health programs in Oregon. And I met Martin because he was a very active voice on this committee, which was 51% family and 49% professionals. When I joined that, I actually was behind the times a bit on both the fact that family and youth voice was emerging in a powerful way in Oregon, and the potent impact of that and the possibilities of that. Really, I learned a lot just by sitting on that committee, getting to know Martin, seeing how he was able to use his voice, which was based on experience and therefore taken very seriously. And the impact of that has been that, now in fact he's co-leading the CSAC committee's co-chair. There's always been a family member in that position over the years. And the reality is that I had the experience that there was very poorly written legislation 3 or 4 years ago. And I met Martin at CSAC, gotten to know other family movements in Oregon. And as child psychiatrists, we really were concerned about this legislation. And we let Martin know and his organization. And the governor's office, I think within hours, had 30 or 40 messages sent to their office about how concerned the organization Oregon Youth Move was about this legislation. And the governor vetoed it. Now, I'd like to think it was because I, went to talk to the governor's office, or my colleagues did, but I actually think it was the family voice and Youth Move Oregon's voice that impacted legislation in Oregon. That was being against something, but the other thing is that your organization has been part of something, promoting something. It's not just against things, it's actually promoting things. It could be that a person and an organization that was built on the adverse experiences they've had in the system of care, the focus could be sort of talking about that frustration and then stopping there. It could just be everybody getting together and talking about how bad their experiences were. And there's some value in doing that. Unfortunately, the value is limited because really the next step in that process is participating with the system, cautiously maintaining one's sense of identity even though you're participating, in order to change the system. It's really hard to change from outside. You really have to actually become part of it to some degree. And I think because now Youth Move Oregon has become a part of a number of different strategies, the change that's occurring is based on the historical knowledge that you carry around the adverse experience and suggesting strategies to improve that. And I think that's been an enormous impact. It's not over. There's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done. I think when you look at the important factors that lead to good transition age adult mental health care, one of the things I didn't mention is that having people involved in policy and discussions around implementation strategies who have been through the experience themselves is a really critical factor. Martin once showed a picture of levels of understanding of involvement of youth and families in the system of care, from tokenism to full integration. And we're moving up the ladder. It's very slow. Mental health system is actually quite a bit farther ahead than the physical health system. But there's language in new laws around how our health system is to be delivered in Oregon, the CCOs, coordinated care organizations, that include family voice in that process. And Martin, Oregon Youth Move, and other family organizations in Oregon have led to those pieces of language which mean something. They're not being implemented yet in a manner that is satisfactory, but that is even a concept. One couldn't have even conceptualized that idea 20 years ago, that youth and adult consumers would actually influence how healthcare is delivered. Can you imagine 20 years ago that even being a sparkle in somebody's eye? It wasn't. And now it's happening. So it's been really a remarkable process, lots of opportunity for improvement from there as well. The most urgent thing we need to do for the system of care for young adults is recognize that they have unique needs. Really, that conceptually is the most important thing we need to do now. One of the main takeaways I guess I would perhaps share with my younger colleagues, and I do in our program at OHSU, when we train our fellows in child psychiatry and our adult psychiatry residents, is that really the experience of mental health care needs to be a partnership, and that applies to anybody. In other words, although the language may be different and the details may be different, whether you're trying to support a young child, an adolescent, a young adult, an older adult, it's really something that's the same. We shouldn't shift this particular notion that this is a partnership in delivering care. It's not you delivering care to somebody. It's you providing care with somebody. It's a collaborative effort in order for that to be experienced that way, and for the person to see this as an effort that they feel motivated and engaged in, and trusting that it's in their best interest. And that's where good outcomes come from. There's nothing magical about 18. That's what the brain science is telling us. It's a transitional period, and we shouldn't fit our expectations based on a single age.
Great.
The one thing that we really should take home from that insurance data that we have about people dropping out of care is that we have to have an intentional process that creates a different approach to this population of people to be effective. You know, the impact of the experience of trauma on somebody's development is profound, and we actually think that most adverse health outcomes, physical health outcomes, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, substance abuse, having multiple sexual partners, there's a direct correlation between how many events of trauma you've had and how at risk you are for those adverse health outcomes. And I think that we need to do something now for transition-age adults now, and we also need to do something about how do we create opportunities to reduce the impact of trauma and strengthen resilience in people, which has to do with supporting attachment and relationship early on in life. And those health promotion and prevention strategies, really in the long run, are what we need in order to address supporting this population. Because it really, if you have improved capacity for relationship and attachment, then you can seek others when those challenges occur in your transition age years. And that is the resilience factor. We've got to start earlier to do that. Of course, as a psychiatrist, the biological part of what I focus on has to do with there are conditions that really respond well to psychiatric medicines. And the key strategy here is thinking about a person from a comprehensive perspective before medicines are used. So we're really trying to think the biological, social, psychological causation of why is a person coming with the struggles that they have. And if medicines are part of it, how do we actually think about that in terms of the risks and the benefits, and then having that person be a partner in that decision making so that if they turn 18, they actually are thinking, yeah, this is a health decision that my doctor made with me in my best interests, and I feel good about that relationship, so I'm going to keep seeking care because that's the relationship that was established when I was younger. I know I can have a trusting relationship with somebody, even when I become an adult.
I discovered Youth Move Oregon by another youth who was coming here, who is also my sister. She made me come to one of the groups, and after that, I just started coming afterwards. I didn't want to be any part of anything that had to do with groups or meeting people because that would make me vulnerable, make me open to people, would have to make me need to get to know people. Youth Move became a part of my life in 2011. I was in a tough spot in 2011. I had just had my son, and I was still having issues, and I was into myself more than needing other people. I came here and I met Mike, who is one of the staff members here, and I met Aaron, and I related to them. Mike, through the drug issues, he was in recovery. Aaron, through cultural issues, gang issues, recovery too, and I really got to know them, which made me feel comfortable because we can relate to each other, Not say war stories, but how to get through those struggles from our past. My involvement with Youth Move, it started that I was just one of the youth, just showing up, taking in the support that I can get, I'm still on probation. They would go to my court dates. if I needed help in school, you know, if I was just having like a hard time in life, I would just walk up to them, and I wouldn't just apply the advice that they were giving me, but I would take that advice, use it on myself, and help other youth too, you know what I mean? To inspire them to do the same thing. And I was also able to text Elliot, Erica, Jamie, Aaron, you know, like whenever I had a question or if I needed help during a struggle. And then I became a volunteer. My life, before becoming a volunteer, my life, listening to their advice, I started getting better. I started becoming more stable. And then I became the person that all the youth were walking up to. Hey, I need to talk to you. I need your help with this. I became the volunteer here at Youth Move.
Passing it out.
Yeah.
Like what was good.
Yeah, paying it forward basically, you know?
Yeah.
When I became a volunteer, I took what I went through, my homelessness, my recovery, my mental health struggles, and I wanted to help other youth and young adults to know, you know, this is a path that you can take. So I was helping a homeless youth find housing. I was helping hungry youth get food boxes, get food stamps, get OHP for healthcare, you know. I was also attending meetings, conferences. I became a voice basically to take what I went through and help them, you know. Other than my sister making me come here, I wanted to try something new. I had just had my son, and I wanted to build myself. When I moved here to Oregon, I swore that I would not do the same thing like I did in Los Angeles. I wanted to build myself to be a way better person, to show my true potential, you know, to people. My life was crazy. It really was. And then I became a father. And then I became a good best friend. So I was having so many struggles at that time when I just started coming here with mental and emotional issues, getting over PTSD, having to deal with depression, you know. And me coming here was like me taking a step towards that, you know. Well, Youth Move gives me everything, you know. It gives me everything I need in my life. I help inspire people. I help motivate people. And there's no better feeling than that. There's no better feeling knowing that you did some good during the day. No matter how big it is. It can be you just walking up to someone who's having a rough day and just be like, hey, no, this and this happened. Make them laugh, you know? They smiled during the day. It's a good thing. Because not a lot of youth have that, you know, that inspiration to do something. So I benefit by helping them learn that there's more out there.
Cool.
Peer support is very important for the transitional age of 14 to 25 because not all youth and young adults have that support, the emotional and mental support that is needed today. at home or at school or even with their friends, they don't get the support that they need, you know. A lot of the youth, well, I can't say youth because I'm one of them, you know. We don't know how to reach out. We don't know what we need to get through to the next day when we're having struggles, you know. And that's why it's so important to us to have that support, because we don't know if we're gonna wreck our life and learn from it later, or if we're gonna learn now and then move forward, you know? So it's like really important. Youth Move Hop-In Center is a very safe environment, you know? It's actually a really big part of it, of the support. It's a great example, you know? For all the youth and young adults in the transitional age who need and want that support. You know, we have the recovery groups where you can walk in and feel comfortable with other young adults your age who are in recovery. Because I know when you go to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting or an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and there's older people, you feel downgraded because you don't want to talk because they're like, okay, well, you guys are older than me, you know? And then you can also come here for your mental health if you have depression, anxiety, PTSD, you know, and ask for help and not have to worry about being judged. Not have to worry about, oh, well, you have this and I can't relate to you. No, we try to relate to you. We help to give advice so that way we can help you be a better person and you can find yourself as a better person that you didn't even know was there.
I'm Jamie Farish, Regional Director for Clackamas and Washington County programs. I'm going to talk to you today and tell you a little bit about the service array that Youth Move Oregon provides in relation to peer-delivered services. The peer-delivered services that we provide, we hire youth and young adults to work with youth and young adults ages 14 to 25, 26, right in there. And we hire these youth and young adults that come from many different backgrounds and expertise in their own lives. So at Youth Move Oregon, what we value not is a degree or a piece of paper or schooling per se, it's more the schooling of life. And so we hire youth and young adults that have expertise and lived experience with recovery, mental illness. They may have learning disabilities, they may experience other disabilities, incarceration, they're alumni of the foster care system and identify as LGBTQI2S. And we bring these people in and we support them and we train them, and then they work with youth and young adults throughout our different communities in a variety of different ways. One of the ways that our youth and young adult peer service providers work with others in the community is through wraparound peer support partners in order to be a part of the wraparound programs that are throughout Oregon. Currently, part of the wraparound fidelity is that you have a wraparound youth partner that ensures the youth and young adult voice at the table, that their voice is driving treatment, and that there's a plan that's constructed that's going to work well for them. And so our wraparound youth partners are scattered kind of throughout the state. We have several in Washington County and Salem, Mid-Valley region as well. And they're part of a team that's working with our intensive youth and young adults in the systems that are currently participating in wraparound. Another level of peer support providers that we have is based in a drop-in center. One of those drop-in centers is here in Clackamas that I'm lucky to be a part of. And the drop-in center is really a place where youth and young adults can gather and come together in a natural environment that has opportunities for fun, for them to feel at home, to feel like they belong, and even though they don't realize it, to actually get some of the help with supports that they may need in their life. Some youth don't know that they need help. Some know they need help but have no idea this is a place that can provide the help for them. And so the peer support providers that work in the drop-in center are very relatable. We've actually had, complaints in the past which led to having our youth peer support partners wear badges because the adults said that they couldn't tell the difference between our staff and the youth that were in the center. And, we got the badges for them, but to us that's a compliment and tells us that we're hiring the right people that are able to relate and engage with these youth and young adults. We allow the relationships to naturally form, and the peer support providers are trained and move through and connect with the youth and young adults on their level and over time. And so they don't see it, but we actually have a whole framework underneath how we provide these peer delivered services to these youth and young adults throughout the organization. Our framework is based on the 40 developmental assets, which come out of the Search Institute and positive youth development work, in which they're research-backed, and in a nutshell, these assets, we know that youth that are successful adults later in life, the more assets that you have, the more successful you're going to be. And the assets are broken down into internal and external assets. And really those assets guide the framework for how we work with these youth and young adults. So the peer service providers, after having seen the youth or young adult in the drop-in center several times, or maybe referral and they've met with them out in the community or whatever, but they've started the engagement process, and they work with them around with that young person, finding really kind of going on a journey to see what assets have they already developed, and we track those assets, and then we take a look at what assets do they have and what assets have they not developed yet. We also work with them to develop what's called a life assignment, and the life assignment for them is basically similar to goal setting, but it's driven by that young person, and it's anything they want it to be. So if they want to be an NBA basketball star, we work from there. If they want to get a job, they want to graduate high school, they want to go back for their GED, they want to have visitation with their son, they want to cut their first rap album, whatever it is, we put that life assignment down, and we allow that life assignment to sort of guide and direct how we work with that youth around choosing which of those assets to focus on and work on first that tie into their life assignment and them attaining that goal and that success for themselves. The youth and young adult is very involved in choosing which assets they want to focus on and why. And we start that off with really a celebration of strengths and looking at what assets have they developed, and teaching them why these assets matter, and then we create this plan with them, and then we start working on the plan. And the job of the peer support providers are to knock out any of the barriers that are in the way to them achieving these assets. And most of these youth and young adults have tried to build these assets in the past, and there are barriers that come in the way, whether they be barriers from past trauma, the community they live in, poverty, being in the foster care system, struggling with addiction, whatever that is, whatever the barriers are, we go knock them down, get rid of them, and we build whatever partnership or collaboration it takes so that they can build that asset. So I'll give you an example. One example of that is we had a young man whom life assignment was he wrote rap and was a rapper, and really wanted to be able to put his creative work down on a CD and cut a CD, and so looking at the assets that this young man hadn't had the opportunity to develop or had run into repeatedly barriers around developing it, related to poverty, related to limits put on potential, a whole group of things. So one of our peer service providers said, we're going to make it happen. Went out in the community, found a producer who actually produces rap, and hooked them up, and so when I think about why I do what I do and what sort of led me to working with Youth Move Oregon, when I look back on my history, actually just growing up, I'm an only child, and I've always loved working with kids, babies, children, youth, whatever. Even when I was one, I was always babysitting and doing all kinds of fun things. Always was drawn to working with youth that experienced special needs in some capacity, particularly drawn to youth that experienced autism, but also what we now know today are a lot of the at-risk youth that we serve, actually. So even when I was still in high school, running before and after school programs, all the youth in all the programs that had difficulty, with cognitive flexibility or managing their emotions, regulating their emotions, would get very angry or upset. They always sent them to me, and I worked with them and had this natural kind of way, I think, of really sort of understanding and being able to connect with them on that level. And years later, after having my son, whom experiences his own challenges around being cognitively inflexible and some mental health challenges, I learned about collaborative problem solving, and I realized that I've sort of have been collaborative problem solving for many years in how I worked with all of these young people. I am blessed every day to work with these youth and young adults that come in this center. I believe that youth and young adults today have a much harder time making it and being successful in life, despite stats that might say we have more services or supports than we used to, or we can communicate easier, or whatever the things that you hear. That's just really not true. I see so many of them struggling every day, and I really feel like if anything I do, whether it be writing a grant or working on a contract or training peer support providers, going out in the field, working with the youth and young adults themselves, helping them solve problems, whatever that is, that I'm making a difference, and it makes all the work that I've done worth it to me, and is why I get up each morning. At Youth Move Oregon, we know what we're doing works because we're doing it based on the 40 developmental assets. We've taken the Searched Institute's work and all the research behind it, and we're using that in the way that we work with youth to get better outcomes. And it's simple, it's effective, and it's working. We see the results every day with the youth and young adults that we serve. So one example around building the assets is we have a young man whom experiences autism and ADHD. And what we know about autism with communication disorder and some of the challenges around that, and even ADHD, and we look at the strengths that those brings, but also what are some of those different assets that maybe they have to work on. And I found myself one day at the open mic night here at the drop-in center, and I was watching all of these different youth and young adults from these different walks of life, all these different strengths, different challenges, all relating together and all supporting one another. So we had, musicians that were rapping, spoken word, singers, people playing instruments, songs they wrote. And at one point, this young man who experiences autism got up and was doing stand-up comedy. And, for somebody my background has been working, a lot of years with those individuals that do experience autism on some level. And I thought to myself, we're really doing something right here. Because not only did he feel comfortable and supported and had worked on building his assets to be able to stand up and do stand-up comedy, but automatically we had a peer support provider jump up, and then another youth in the program jump up, and then what developed before my eyes was this 3-person stand-up comedy routine where this individual was supported, and they basically, almost like batting a ball, went back and forth with the comedy and kept the show going. And it was funny, it was supportive, you could see the assets being developed there, the relatability, and that, that's really what it's all about right there.
It's really cool.
My name is Erica Quitting, and I work with Youth Move Oregon as a youth support partner, as well as the coordinator for the Silent Watch. The Silent Watch to me is a place where youth and young adults go when they're looking for hope, when they've been searching for a reason to keep going or a reason to keep pushing forward. And the Silent Watch to me is a place where people look for the thing they haven't found elsewhere, something that holds them up when they've been struggling. The Silent Watch is an online campaign that youth go to when they're having a hard time. The Silent Watch has received over 100,000 unique visitors and has been seen across the world. I think it's important to have content online that's accessible to youth and young adults because it's one of the ways that they access the world. It's one of the ways that they receive information and knowledge. As well as when you're struggling, I think it's easier to find stuff online and to connect with people than it can be in person. I think the Silent Watch is really innovative in the way that it uses graphic designs and bold statements to reach youth, using youth-friendly language and connecting with them at a deeper level. It's not just a surface topic. I think it touches deeper than anything else. I think the way that we mix bold statements that touch home with youth combined with innovative graphics and photos of a faceless person, so it could be anybody. I think that really speaks to youth because it could be them or it could be a friend. I think that's something that touches home with youth, that could be their statement, that might be their statement, and I think that really resonates with them. The man in the hood is all of us, those who have gone through dark times and those of us who are currently going through it and those of us who in the future might struggle. And I think he speaks to youth and a lot of people because it could be them. And it might have been them, and it might be them again in the future. I work with a variety of different youth who I've shared the Silent Watch with and what it means, and they love it. They find that the statements that are made really hit home with them in a way that maybe they aren't able to verbalize themselves or aren't ready to share with the people around them. And I think it gives them a sense of comfort to know that they're not alone and that other people have experienced these things as well. In the past, I have shown the Silent Watch to the youth that I work with, and they find that it really touches them in a way that is healing. It's something that they haven't experienced before. It really resonates with them and it hits home because it could be them and it could be the things that they're unable to say. And I think that it helps them to not feel so alone and give them hope that there are people out there who can help them. The Silent Watch has received over 100,000 unique visitors and has been seen across the world. So you have to ask, why is this so successful? So you have to ask yourself, why is this reaching young people like other content can't? December 22nd, 2012 was the day that the world was supposed to end, and for me it kind of did. That was the day that I found out that my brother Matthew had gone missing. I was with my fiance at my aunt's house and we were at a Christmas party, and I got a phone call from my brother's wife, Ricky, letting me know that Matt hadn't come home. And I didn't think much of it then. I was worried for him, but I didn't think much of it then, just that maybe he had gone out with friends. So we finished our night and we went home and we talked about it, and the next morning I was more worried that he still hadn't gotten contact. His Facebook had been shut down, which is unlike him. And so I contacted the family and nobody had heard from him. And so I gave it a couple more days just in case he decided to take a break or needed some air, and we still hadn't heard anything. And so I got in contact with Ricky, and she let me know that they had put together some flyers to be posted in the community. And so I met up and we decided to post the flyers, and I spent 3 weeks up and down the Hawthorne district and all over Portland with my family posting flyers. And I always held the hope that he was in the Bahamas on a beach or somewhere, and every time somebody said they were sorry or that things happened during Christmas, I just told them he's on vacation, he'll be back. And months went by, 6 months of posting flyers and living with the fact that we couldn't find him, and fighting with our family because I was determined that he was coming home. And I fought with everybody, and I talked to people who'd seen him and the things that he was doing. You know, he was quitting smoking, so that was the reason that he was living, because people who die don't quit smoking. He took a cab home from the bar that night, and people who are sad and depressed don't make smart decisions like that. That was my thought. And months went by, and I cried and grieved and yelled and screamed and posted more flyers, and we still couldn't find him. And I went online and I was watching the news and waiting for anything, and there was nothing, not a word. And there would be people that had been found. There was a man that was found in the Johnson Creek River, and I immediately thought it was him, and it turns out that it wasn't. And I was filled with relief and joy because it wasn't him, so he was still coming home. And every year we go fishing at Diamond Lake, and that March we decided to go fishing, and I don't have reception there. And on our way home, when my phone finally got reception, my phone was blown up. I had multiple text messages and multiple Facebooks, multiple phone calls and voicemails, and they all said that I needed to call somebody, and they had found Matt, and I was relieved I had found him. So I called his adopted father, Dennis, and he told me that they had found Matt's body in the river, just north of the St. John's Bridge, and that he had completed suicide off the St. John's Bridge. I couldn't breathe. I loved my brother so much. My entire life I had searched for one of my siblings, somebody I could look up to, somebody I could believe in, somebody who had ethics and a heart, and he did. And it was soul crushing to know that this person didn't reach out to me. They didn't call me. They didn't text me. That my love wasn't enough to save him. And we ended up going to his memorial service, and I sat with my birth mother in the back as everybody said sweet words about him and the kind man that he was, and his children sat in the front pew. And to know that we had searched so hard for him, and the only thing that kept going through my mind was St. John's Bridge is a long bridge, and that kind of walk, that long of a walk, to be by yourself and to be struggling with those thoughts and to not have one person stop him or see him or reach out to him was too much. I didn't get out of bed for 3 days after his service, and we just laid there and we talked about him and about the person that he was. And my fiance got to know him before I did. They grew up together, and it was through those stories that I really got to know my brother and who he was and the kind of man he was, and talking to his wife and his children. to know that he'd left an indelible mark on the people left behind. And through all of that, I was still angry. I was angry that I loved him so much that he couldn't call me. He couldn't share with me the things that were keeping him down, things that he was struggling with. I would have given anything to have been there, to have talked to him, to have told him what a good person he was and how much we all loved him and needed him. And he was just gone. And when I heard about the Silent Watch, it was a way for me to make it through the tidal waves of grief and anger and sadness and rage and everything else, to find another perspective on suicide and depression, to realize that the kind of pain that these people are in when they contemplate these things is so engulfing. It's so swallows you whole. And that summer was probably the first time that I'd ever struggled with my own thoughts of wanting to die, of thinking that I wasn't enough for people, that I wasn't enough for him. I hold out hope that the Silent Watch, what it could have been for Matt, is what I think it could be for other people. That place where they reach, where it's at their darkest and they can't tell anybody. They find a place where they can let that go. They can tell somebody. They can be heard. And maybe they can be caught before it's too late. I remember seeing in my news feed that Youth Move and Silent Watch was working with the Vista Bridge to post messages of hope for people who were suffering. The Vista Bridge is known as the suicide bridge. It has the highest death rate of all the bridges in Oregon. And I think back to Matt and to the walk that he took and being alone and struggling with those things and thinking that maybe if he'd saw those things, those messages of hope, and that tomorrow would happen, that maybe he would have reconsidered it. Maybe it would have given him hope that while it's dark now, it won't always be. This is why the Silent Watch is so important to me. It's because I think we can make a difference in the lives of youth and young adults in our community who are struggling. I feel like if Matt had been able to connect with the Silent Watch, it might have been the thing that kept him from completing. Matthew is my oldest birth brother, and he was the one who reconnected me with my family. He found me on Facebook, and he's a very witty character, just the way that he spoke to me and communicated with me. And unfortunately, as life does, it has a way of going separate ways. And he was married and had children, and I was in the midst of college at the time, and so we weren't as close as I'd hoped. But I remember the last communication I had with him, he had sent me an email. We were collaborating on an article for the Adoption Mosaic, and I was apologizing profusely for not being a part of his life and just what a terrible sister I was for not being there. And he said that was okay, that he understood that people got caught up and not to feel guilty about it, that he didn't operate within systems of guilt and obligation, and that he loved me and that he was my brother, and that wasn't something that was ever going to go away or could be taken away by others. It just was. And the way that he communicated was profound. The way that he organized his thoughts and communicated them to me, it went straight to your heart. And I will always remember that about him. One of my driving forces behind working with Youth Move Oregon was the fact that I wanted to save Matthew. And I couldn't save him. But I know that being a part of Youth Move Oregon and the Silent Watch gives me the opportunity to reach youth in the future and be a part of lifting them out of their darkness. My name is Erica Quitting, and I aged out of the foster care system, and I'm a part of Youth Move Oregon.
I discovered Youth Move Oregon by another youth who was coming here, who is also my sister. She made me come to one of the groups, and after that, I just started coming afterwards. I didn't want to be any part of anything that had to do with groups or meeting people, because that would make me vulnerable, make me open to people, would have to make me need to get to know people. Youth Move became a part of my life in 2011. I was in a tough spot in 2011. I had just had my son, and I was still having issues, and I was into myself more than needing other people. I came here and I met Mike, who is one of the staff members here, and I met Aaron, and I related to them. Mike, through the drug issues, he was in recovery. Aaron, through cultural issues, gang issues, recovery too, and I really got to know them, which made me feel comfortable because we can relate to each other, not say war stories, but how to get through those struggles from our past. My involvement with Youth Move, it started that I was just one of the youth, just showing up, taking in the support that I can get, I'm still on probation. They would go to my court dates. If I needed help in school, if I was just having a hard time in life, I would just walk up to them, and I wouldn't just apply the advice that they were giving me, but I would take that advice, use it on myself, and help other youth too, to inspire them to do the same thing. And I was also able to text Elliot, Erica, Jamie, Aaron, whenever I had a question or if I needed help during a struggle. And then I became a volunteer. My life, before becoming a volunteer, my life, listening to their advice, I started getting better. I started becoming more stable. And then I became the person that all the youth were walking up to. Hey, I need to talk to you. I need your help with this. I became the volunteer here at Youth Move.
Passing it on.
Yeah.
What was good.
Yeah, paying it forward basically,
Yeah.
When I became a volunteer, I took what I went through, my homelessness, my recovery, my mental health struggles, and I wanted to help other youth and young adults to know, this is a path that you can take. So I was helping a homeless youth find housing. I was helping hungry youth get food boxes, get food stamps, get OHP for healthcare, I was also attending meetings, conferences. I became a voice basically to take what I went through and help them, Other than my sister making me come here, I wanted to try something new. I had just had my son, and I wanted to build myself. When I moved here to Oregon, I swore that I would not do the same thing like I did in Los Angeles. I wanted to build myself to be a way better person, to show my true potential, to people. My life was crazy. It really was. And then I became a father. And then I became a good best friend. So I was having so many struggles at that time when I just started coming here with mental and emotional issues, getting over PTSD, having to deal with depression, and me coming here was like me taking a step towards that, I get everything. I help inspire people. I help motivate people. And there's no better feeling than that. There's no better feeling knowing that you did some good during the day. No matter how big it is. It can be you just walking up to someone who's having a rough day and just be like, hey, no, this and this happened. Make them laugh, They smiled during the day. It's a good thing. Because not a lot of youth have that, that inspiration to do something. So I benefit by helping them learn that there's more out there.
Cool.
Well, Youth Move gives me everything, It gives me everything I need in my life. Peer support is very important for the transitional age of 14 to 25 because not all youth and young adults have that support, the emotional and mental support that is needed today. At home or at school or even with their friends, they don't get the support that they need, a lot of the youth, well, I can't say youth because I'm one of them, we don't know how to reach out. We don't know what we need to get through to the next day when we're having struggles, And that's why it's so important to us to have that support because we don't know if we're gonna wreck our life and learn from it later or if we're gonna learn now and then move forward, So it's really important. Youth Move Hop-In Center is a very safe environment, It's actually a really big part of it, of the support. It's a great example, for all the youth and young adults in the transitional age who need and want that support. We have the recovery groups where you can walk in and feel comfortable with other young adults your age who are in recovery. Because I know when you go to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting or an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and there's older people, you feel downgraded because you don't want to talk because they're like, okay, well, you guys are older than me, And then you can also come here for your mental health if you have depression, anxiety, PTSD, and ask for help and not have to worry about being judged. Not have to worry about, oh, well, you have this and I can't relate to you. No, we try to relate to you. We help to give advice so that way we can help you be a better person and you can find yourself as a better person that you didn't even know was there.